Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for the organizers for making this possible. This is clearly going to be a super cool event, and I'm excited to kick it off. This is actually only going to be like a 15-minute talk. I was thinking it could have been like unconference style, where we get in a room and we kind of like talk about / like do sticky notes with alternative features of the internet, but I'm happy being on stage. It's fine. Cool. So I'm Jasmine. I'll be talking about alt features for the internet, and I have a lot of logos to my name. They're basically part of my heritage now, but I'm mostly here on behalf of Versus. So I've basically cared about corporate governance since I was born, and basically my theory of personal identity is that I'm like an assemblage of logos that I've worked for. I've worked since I was 14 and for a variety of companies, but I'll call out a few that are relevant to my talk today. So I joined OpenAI right after they started experimenting. They were a nonprofit, and then they became a nonprofit owned, like that governs a for-profit structure that allows them to capitalize appropriately. And now they're like 7 different entities or something like this, something like really weird. I worked on their sole multi-stakeholder policy paper on developing AI in a trustworthy way, which included the creation of institutional trust mechanisms like whistleblower programs and an auditing board. None of these have come to life, which is really sad, but that's a different story and a different talk. I've also started a few of my own organizations from traditional nonprofit structures like Kernel Magazine, which has it's a magazine by and for technologists. It's a pretty traditional nonprofit structure where you have like a core, basically full-time team, frequently unpaid, that's managing like an army of volunteers. To my own private company, which I bootstrapped to a sale to a private equity firm 2 years ago. So I'm really familiar with corporate structures, as many of us in our room have like lived experience with. The collective psychology that they produce, and the material and political outcomes that they create on the ground and on the web. I became like politically radicalized, so to speak, or at least like conscious within a community of technologists called Reboot. You can check them out at joinreboot.org. I ran a living cooperative together with a dozen technologists in the middle of nowhere on a goat farm where we birthed Kernel. And then I started Versus, which is like this like self-governed kind of anarchist, prefigurative collective, lots of adjectives, which I'll talk about today. I was doing that full-time at some point, but have found it's like more sustainable as a part-time thing, and now I'm a co-founder of Trellis, which is like a LLM-powered custom tutor and book companion. We're building the primer for the diamond age. Ultimately, I got into technology for reasons that are probably similar to some people in this room. It's amazing that we can distribute stuff for free and imagine different economics. It's amazing that we can change people's lives for basically some marginal cloud compute costs. And the goal of my talk today is for us to imagine even more, to imagine more than just like the economic structure that's like kind of logically downstream of the way that the web is construed today, and imagine alternate organizational forms that could dictate and garden the evolution of technology and transform technology in a different way, because I believe people in this room have that power. So, corporations have incredible power. We know this. But it's gotten more extreme recently. Like if you think of the most extreme example, Microsoft, in a single year, invested $1 billion into OpenAI via the development of GPT-3. And it had a staff at that time of approximately 150 employees, with many fewer on the core development team. It's really hard to come by historical comparisons of the ratio of the number of people to the size of the capital pool they have the authority to direct. There's this really amazing paper by a few really good friends of mine, Darren Asimoglu, not him, he's not a friend yet, Divya Siddharth, Glenn Weil, who inferred basically in AI, how AI fails us, is a collective paper, that this is one of the largest capital investments ever exclusively directed by such a small group. The ratio of the Soviet investment in 1975 in the state planning agency Gosplan was roughly the same as that associated with the OpenAI investment. So it's actually pretty unprecedented. Yet, the corporate form is historically contingent. It didn't have to work this way. I won't get into the long history here, although it's really fascinating, and I'll be organizing a dinner afterwards where we can nerd out about this stuff. But basically, with like the creation of the American railroads, a bunch of guys got together and were like, people really want to cooperate with people and trust people with limited liability, with people who are not their family members or next of kin. And then they created this thing called the LLC or the C Corp, which, I don't know, it's not the best thing. It just happened. So I'm not going to go into all of these things today. These are some alternatives to LLCs and C Corps that people have been experimenting with, people have been building infrastructure with. There's no ecosystem for these things, unlike for C Corps. We know how Stripe Atlas works. Like, there's venture capitalists who are like, I understand this. But they'll shy away from worker co-ops. They'll shy away from perpetual purpose trust. What's a foundation? Cooperatives have there's a big cooperative movement in Toronto that I'm super, super proud of. I'm not from here, but I feel a lot of spiritual ties to the city. I'm Edmontonian. Haifa Co-op, I would say, super amazing work. Platform co-ops, like Drivers Co-op in New York is the largest co-op in the US, which is a worker-owned alternative to Uber. B Corp, think Kickstarter, which actually started in Vancouver. Exit to community stuff, which is some pretty recent work that I'll be actually displaying some of our engagement with as Versus, and just radical rethinking of worker and stakeholder equity, which we are trying to role model at Trellis, although we're going to be a pretty typical venture-backed startup. I didn't put this in my slides, but Canada is actually really amazing at this stuff. We've helped pioneer a lot of these things, and I would love to see Canada become a leader and a birthplace for movements around alternative models of owning the technology that is so important to us. So I'm not going to tie this logically together, but taking a little bit of a shift, if you will, if you'll come with me. I want to talk a little bit about the concept of the digital commons, which is very near and dear to my heart and a lot of why brought me into technology in the first place. So what is the digital commons? It's online commons of info that we all benefit from, that we all own and we contribute to. Think Wikipedia, think all the Reddit things that you spend time on. Twitter, in some sense, even though it's privately owned, is kind of like a public square. And it's also the collective infrastructure that underpins that. That's physical, institutional, technological. It's really important. It has changed my life. I learned a lot of stuff from Wikipedia. And it's also really important for democracy. Just think about it. Just having this collectively edited and audited source of truth is so crucial for deliberation, for shared understanding, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to logically link this to what I was talking about prior, but I have this inkling, and no one really, I'm kind of alone in saying this at a conference talk, because it's not really a fully fledged thought. But I basically think it's really unlikely that traditional venture-backed startups will create commonly owned goods. Their privately owned entities are more likely to produce privately owned goods. It's not necessarily a logical consequence or legally mandated that alternative structures will, but I think they're more likely to. And that's one of the reasons among many that I'm interested in those structures. I'm interested for a number of reasons, just to quickly go over. They're more likely to produce commonly owned goods, or common property. They're also more likely to do material redistribution, and they're also more likely to do power sharing in a way that internalizes negative externalities. Oh, I just want to go back to this quickly. The picture from here is from, I forgot to put the little addendum here, which I do care about. My friend Saffron Wang, who's a co-founder of the Collective Intelligence Project, wrote an amazing piece called Turing Complete Governance. I know it's not the most technically accurate usage of that term, but the concept is there, which is LLCs and C Corps are really just kind of like a value function for a singular value, which is stakeholder financial profit. And can we imagine that the corporate form, that there's some poetry in it, that we can actually design for multi-valuer, that's not a word, multi-value functions. And these are some of the axes. Cool, this is from some big brain people at the Consilience Project, which basically reinforces what I said before, that we really, really need an epistemic commons. I love that phrase. I think it's so crucial as a gate before we all go insane because of AI. Cool, so Versus. I love our logo. We're a creative collective. I started Versus in late 2021 with a couple of dear friends. The entity came about organically after we actually created an artifact together, a declaration of the interdependence of cyberspace, which was actually a reactive response to Meta rebranding itself. And I'll tell you a little bit about that story, because it's a good story. So this is a declaration. If you go to interdependence.online, you'll be able to see it. You can sign it. It's a free transaction. It's just a MetaMask signature. But we really wanted to introduce people to alternate, like transforming technology, the stuff that was hot at the time. We didn't care about crypto at all, but like we wanted to introduce, I care about crypto insofar as it is a laboratory for radical political and economic experiments. I'll caveat that. But we wanted to introduce people to crypto via like a non-financialized, value-laden interaction. And we wanted to create an artifact that operated on like several layers to showcase the value of interdependence. The text itself is deeply like intertextual. It's collectively written. There are no authors. The code is open source. But let me just tell you a little bit about the story, because I actually love this. So basically, the Declaration of the Interdependence of Cyberspace, which is the root document that we forked, is a core part of the cyberpunk canon. Vitalik Buterin like cites it a lot in his talks. Basically, John Perry Barlow, who was like a co-founder of the EFF, was at this like UN meeting where they're trying to regulate the internet as a utility. And he got really pissed. Went back to his hotel, got drunk on some champagne, and just like wrote this manifesto and published it. It's very, very, it's very much like a call to arms. It's very like right libertarian, individual liberalism, like freedom to versus freedom from versus freedom for. And we forked it and just basically Mad Libs'd it with a bunch of like values around mutualism, kinship, more like left libertarian vibes. Blah, blah, blah. Wow, I have so many notes on this. Anyways, I actually think the about page of this artifact is really interesting, and it's actually pretty like worth reading. Cool. And this is our second artifact, which I'll be a bit more concise about, but we use the term pluriverse in the declaration, which we wanted to be responsible to. We didn't want to just like co-opt that term as a term from the revolutionary Zapatistas. And it means a world where many worlds may fit. And this is a world of like alternative epistemes, alternative ontologies, alternative ethics, which is actually like the main part of my personal like philosophy and research. And the purpose of this artifact was a collective attempt, a participatory attempt to extend the ethic of the pluriverse to the digital realm. So we took some of the values of the pluriverse as written about by like activists and scholars and tried to think about how that could be manifested on the web. And I guess to tie together the first half and the second half of this Frankenstein talk, I think that it is crucial to have many modes of creative relating, to creative in an economic sense, to like creation, creative relating to each other, and that is the only way that we can actually create a pluriverse. And I think a pluriverse is the only way that we like survive, basically. This is a really cool group, communityrule.info. They're based out of UC Boulder. They're part of the Media Lab. Nathan Schneider, who's a big role model of mine, who wrote Everything for Everyone, a big book on platform co-ops, is a leader within this lab. And in here, we actually tried to like map out like what our at least political structure and decision-making structure looks like. So you can check this out at communityrule.info. I'm happy to pass along a PDF of this if anyone's interested in Verses in particular or wants to join Verses. We can talk about it. Picture. Okay, cool. This is our governance charter. This took a really, really long time. I'm really proud of this document. It's on Snapshot. You can vote on, no, you can't vote on it, but like theoretically, if you had a Versus token, you would vote on it. Non-financialized, non-transferable soul-bound token basically talks through how we like pass things through. And that's the URL. You should just ask me to send it to you. Okay, last slide. I think as technologists, and I think everyone in this room would probably identify as a technologist, we often get caught up in the beauty and complexity of what we're building, which is really, really beautiful. And sometimes we offload the responsibility of the political, sociological, and economic context surrounding what we make, but like what is present, like what's in the environment, but also what we are creating. Because every time we introduce an artifact, it is an intervention in space. Like we're doing something. You are an artist. You're a performance artist. Like in some way, you're on a stage And you create something. You create there's like such path dependency in the technology we develop. And you are building the path that others will build off of, especially if you're working on open source. And I just think that I'm so pleased as to the progress that like tech ethics people have made over the past while, but I think we're not thinking radically enough. To be radical is to get at the root of things. That is what being radical means. I think we need to radically rethink the structures that govern technology itself and the structures that we elect to participate in and contribute our labor and life force to. So that's my plea to people in this room, that to achieve a pluralist, more collective future for the internet, people in this room need to be deeply, deeply involved, because with technical power does not come only responsibility, it comes leverage. I'll end with one of my favorite quotes. Ask not if a given technology is good or bad. Ask how it distributes and shifts power. I don't know if there's time for questions.
We have to set up for remote talk next, so we can do at least one for sure.
I would love to hear name and like affiliation or something about what you do.
My name's Quinn. I work with Vision with Zeishan and
Cool.
everyone, but I love that you mentioned so many things I really care about.
Woohoo!
But there was a lot of stuff you mentioned, and I guess I was curious if there was one like singular resource you might recommend to somebody who is curious about what you were talking about but doesn't know where to start with the like 5,000 papers you just threw at us.
I'm really sorry.
No, it was
Just
great.
want to preface that.
I have pictures
I
of
consider
every
doing a
slide so I
30-minute
can go
talk
through it.
where, yeah, I'll do a 30-minute talk at some point. I would recommend actually going to, that's a really great question, and I'm really glad you asked that. I would actually recommend going, I really like this. So if you go to CIP.org, which is an organization started from the two most like brilliant people I know, who badly need funding, by the way, like many good projects. But if you go to this website, CIP.org, it'll not only list at the CI Corporation URL, like this like list at length of like, not only like what these structures are, but kind of their like technology readiness levels, like how ready are they to be deployed in the world. But there's also this article on Turing Complete Governance. And they're also very open to chatting with people, especially technologists who are interested in working with them. Radical Exchange is another group I would point to that has done a lot of really great work on mechanism design, although their focus is largely with governments. They've been piloting with Taiwan and with the state of Colorado. I happen to think that the lever of power that technologists usually have access to, are familiar with, can like move in the world as corporations. So I would direct us towards CIP, and then there's also the book Everything for Everyone by Nathan Schneider, which does a pretty cool, like very quick run through of platform co-ops in general. There's also the Platform Co-ops Consortium. I'm also happy to talk at length about this. So
I will do one more question here.
Thank you, Jasmine. My name is Simona. I'm from the Wikimedia Foundation.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wikipedia produces like half of like Google's value. I forgot to cite that.
No problem. I guess like as we talk about alternative futures to these structures, a big part of Wikipedia is like the contributor communities. And so like how does this kind of, or how, are you seeing shifts in how these communities are maybe forming or engaged or finding value within these structures and the evolution of these structures?
Totally. Such a good question. And I would love to like kind of turn the question back to you if Wikimedia has like done anything here, just because one, not my area of research. And I think unfortunately I'm seeing less shifts than I would like. Like if you see in the recent news about like crowd workers or gig workers, this was like the talk of the tech town, like before AI and crypto. Like people were really interested in like gig work and kind of bridging the digital divide and like providing micro work to people overseas. And that was actually some of what I was originally interested in tech, like tech for developing economies. I haven't seen really interesting stuff. At Versus, we were actually thinking about piloting. We were thinking about like how can an organization be porous enough that it actually like interacts meaningfully with a significant part of the public. But I don't think anyone has good answers for this Yeah, or maybe they do exist in theory, but we need like technologists to like socialize them, to like put them into practice. It's a big question mark for me, and it's something that I want to learn more about. So I wish I had a better answer. Let's work on it together.
Thank you, Jasmine. And you mentioned you had a dinner tonight too for governance.
I have no idea. I just had this idea that I wanted to eat together with people, like dinner. Oh, I have a really pretty thank you slide. Hee. Canva's great. The tool for conviviality is the dinner table. So let's eat. I'm a good dinner partner. Regardless of if you care about the future of governance, you are involved in a corporation that we can definitely put under the microscope and bitch about in productive ways. Oh, that was recorded. But yeah, let's do dinner. I have no idea how to organize this. I'm on Discord. Maybe that would be best.
Cool. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you so much.